Consent and the importance of being a good human. Hi everyone, welcome to Signposts for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter, and we have Adair Donaldson here. Hello.
Hello, Kirsten.
We are old friends, aren't we?
We are. I go back a long way.
Yeah,
when our kids were young.
When they were small and short. Now
yes, that's
they're
right.
Tall
now they're big
and hairy.
Yep.
I don't know if yours are hairy.
No, ours aren't hairy, but they're all grown up now. We're empty nesters.
And we saw each other. It was like, hello.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Strange. Mm.
So we live in the same. Is this a city? Is Toowoomba a city?
Yeah.
It's not a town, is it? And I see your name come up every now and then. I don't know if you ever see mine.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh,
we can't avoid each other.
Yeah. And I have heard you going to different schools and talking about consent. And it's been in the back of my mind to ask you to come along and do a podcast, and we're here.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's very exciting. Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's good. So can you explain a little bit? I mean, you're a lawyer, a solicitor.
Yeah.
So, and here you are talking about consent. That's probably not a very common thing.
Yeah, well, I suppose I was looking back on this now. I've been working with schools, particularly in this region, for close to 20 years now. And how it came about was being a lawyer in a regional centre, you're part of that community. And what I could see was, dealing with people and dealing with families, and there they were, and they'd come to see you, and invariably they were good people, but unfortunately they'd made this poor split-second decision that was now going to have life-altering consequences for them. So I got inspired back in 2007, and what inspired me was the dreadful attempts by government to try to address these societal issues. And what I looked at was from a point of view that we're never ever going to stop people making stupid decisions. We're never going to stop sexual assaults occurring, domestic violence occurring, violence occurring. We're never going to be able to stop that. But the one thing that we can do is that we can educate people about what the law is, so they can never ever say, I just didn't know.
Absolutely.
So that was what was driving me.
And there's often a big gap between the law and people's education. I think that's a routine. Do you think?
Yeah, but even because a lot of the schools that I deal with are private schools all over the countryside, and it's taken me over to England and to New Zealand as well. But what I have seen is that when it comes to people's knowledge of what the law is, and particularly these societal issues, with respect to whether it be about consent or whether it be mobile phones or social media and those sorts of things, obviously the law does not discriminate, okay, whatever your socio-economic background is. But what I also found out was that a lot of people just, particularly young adults, they don't understand what the law is or the consequences of that. So I decided to be part of the solution. You can't sit back and then be critical of other people's attempts unless you go and give it a go yourself. So what I did, I started, I read all the literature, etc., and everything was talking about what people wanted to see and what would be engaging young adults would be if we were showing them real case scenarios. No sugarcoating.
Yeah.
Okay, let's show it, warts and all, and plenty of F words, etc. Language
very
that
relatable.
was very relatable. Has to be a good dose of humour in there as well to get them involved. And then you show them the scenarios, and what you hope you're going to be able to do is start that conversation. And if we can get them involved, and if we can be treating them as part of the solution rather than a problem to be solved. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Prevention.
Yeah, no, but more so getting, the one thing that this generation, and I've seen it now because I've been involved for a long period of time, is that young adults, they don't want to be patronised. They don't want to be, they don't want to be lectured to. They want to be treated with respect,
yep.
and then give them the information, and then give them enough information then so they can take part in the conversation, and then they can feel as if they're part of the solution, that they're coming up with the solutions themselves.
And is your focus high school students?
Very much so. For particularly, I've learnt, Kirsten, that what I've got to make sure is I stick to my lane. And my lane is legal consequences. If I go outside my lane and start talking about, the mental health impacts, for instance, that's not what my expertise is. That's yours, okay? But mine is talking about, okay, well, what is the law? What are the legal consequences? And educating people on that.
And I like how you're using lots of case studies, because it's application of the law. And they're going to relate more through those examples. Yeah.
A big one is, for instance, with respect to mobile phones. People still have got very little understanding of what the law is when it comes to what you can and can't take pictures of. And then the sharing of imagery, so that even when we're seeing young adults now, and when I'm talking about young adults, they may be 15, 16, 17, and the sharing of images, where one person's saying to another, hey, show us your bits, and somebody's then supplying, and then they're sharing that imagery. They really still don't appreciate how serious that is.
So when they are sharing these images...
Yeah, well, that's, even procuring the images, if you've got two kids that are less than 16, we're talking about pedophilia there. So if one's saying, hey, listen, show us your bits, and then someone's supplying that, that's pretty serious. Yeah. And particularly then if they're sharing it, well, that's another serious offence as well. So what we'll see in Australia is that the police will do whatever they can to avoid having to charge kids.
Yeah.
Because if they do get charged, well, that's being charged with a criminal offence. That's a sexual offence. And in some states they can be placed on the sex offenders register, and that's for listeners, that is a list that you do not want to be on. It's where the pedophiles are, it's where the rapists are, it's when people are using their mobile phones inappropriately are as well. But what we know is that once that kid hits 18, well, it's a whole, they will then be treated as an adult at that point in time, and then there will be significant consequences. So they've got to learn young as to what the law is and what they can and can't do with those mobile phones.
Absolutely. And these are children, really, and dealing with adult consequences.
That's right.
That's extremely daunting.
Yeah, because one of the things that we tend to do is that well-intentioned people are saying, oh, well, this is normal. This is normal that people are sharing imagery as part of their sexuality, as part of growing up, etc. Well, no, that's not right.
Are they saying it's normal or it's common?
It's common, but they're also saying that, well, that's what kids are doing, so that's about exploring their sexuality and those sorts of things, and they're making excuses for their behaviour. I say, well, unless, until the law changes, well, that's not a healthy respect for anybody.
No, I think that's exploitation.
If they want to then get to 18 and they want to be sharing images consensually, well, okay, that's fine. But up until that age, it still should be treated as seriously as what they're doing there.
So there's different laws up till 16 and then different laws from 16 to 18?
It depends. Again, it depends in states, etc., but there's federal laws as well. But anything under the age of 18 can be regarded as pedophilia.
Wow, there you go. Very serious stuff.
Yeah, it is. So that's the sort of stuff we're doing, Kirsten.
It's wonderful education.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that, that you show interest in while you asked me along here tonight was particularly with respect to consent.
Yes.
And the issues with respect to gender violence as well. Consent obviously is always going to be an issue, and it's probably ever since the Me Too movement more people are talking about consent, but we've still got a long way to go, but we've come a long way, from when I started in the space in 2007. If we were delivering a session to a group of young men would be saying, it didn't become non-consensual until she said no. well, we've come a long way since then, and particularly the laws have changed now with respect to affirmative consent laws in Australia, which means that you have to be checking in every step of the way. But I know those laws, for instance, over in England, for instance, there's similar laws over there, and it's good to see that those laws are moving with the times.
Do you think it's complicated, consent?
Complicated?
Can I give you an example?
Yeah, for sure. Let's go.
So I found myself in I think it's called restorative justice meeting.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so there I was, and I was involved with one of the two parties. So teenage girl, teenage boy had been dating, and I was in there with both sets' parents and the police and etc. And it was, So in the process of the discussion, the boy was saying that he did not agree that he'd done anything wrong, and the girl obviously had thought that. But then the discussion was actually quite good. It kind of put the situation on the table and actually talked through what happened with a lot of detail. And what came of that was, to me, remarkable. They had started off with a getting together situation, and there was nothing verbal between either parties. And then there was a point where the girl had decided she wanted to stop. No verbal was given. And they continued for a bit longer, but not to the finish. They stopped at that point because she communicated that she wanted to stop then by literally standing up and walking away. He pulled back at that point, and that was what happened. And the parents of the boy said, well, they both got involved with this. She didn't ask him for consent either. She didn't ask him for consent to get started with that. He didn't ask her for consent, two parties. And both agreed that when they'd started, they both were consenting. They'd never said anything, so they both agreed in the meeting. And then she changed her mind and didn't show that or indicate that. And then got more determined in her mind, and then stood up, walked away, and he backed off. He stopped, and he was under serious charges with rape. And the parents said, "Well, this is my partner, and this is my partner. What percentage of time do we have sex without asking for consent?" And they basically said for more than half the time there was no verbal request within their relationship for consent in their marriage. And then the police officer stepped in and said, "Same with me, with my wife. I don't actually ask her, and she doesn't ask me. We just kind of know." And it just kind of became a big mess of confusion. And the kids ended up sitting back. Well, the parents all discussed, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is confusing. I don't think it should have ever kind of got to that point, to be honest, because I think it was lots of misunderstanding. But I walked out thinking, what is going on?
But it is complex from a point of view where we're negotiating intimacy here, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And from a point of view that particularly when we're talking about that the age that kids now are participating in sexual activity is becoming younger and younger. All right, that it doesn't make it legal. Still the age of consent, certainly in Queensland and most states in Australia, is still 16.
Yes.
Okay.
These two were between 16 and 18.
Yeah, 16 to 18. But still at 16 and 18, that you're still dealing with the complexities that come with intimacy.
Absolutely.
And negotiating that. And
ensuring that both parties are feeling really good. So
what's happened now in most states in Australia, they're bringing in laws with respect to affirmative consent. So it used to be in situations like that where people could rely upon an honest and reasonable mistake. Hey, listen, I thought you wanted it. I thought we were still going. I thought it was all there. I thought it was okay. You didn't say stop. The laws now have if they haven't changed, they're slowly changing in most states where they're coming back to affirmative consent, which effectively means that you have to be checking in every step of the way, to make sure that, hey, we're right to go to that next level.
So verbally?
Yeah, not only verbal, it can be by actions, okay, but just because someone's lying there and they're not they're not into it. But you see that with that long-term intimacy with husbands and wives or same-sex couples, that they will know from a point of view that they've done it or negotiated consent for a long time. But let's not lose sight that in any long-term relationship there can be non-consensual, and it's just as much rape as any other time. Okay, and that happens. We know that happens.
I would say that from my 23 years as a clinical psychologist, I dramatically see more rape within marriages and de facto relationships than not.
Yeah.
There's a bold statement, but that's black and white.
Yeah, so we know.
But they don't speak up.
So you asked the question about whether it's, can it be grey area? Of course there's grey areas there. But what we're trying to do, and certainly with the training that we're doing, is we're trying to get people to appreciate, hey, listen, intimacy is complex. All right, don't be putting yourself in that situation, because invariably what we see, and particularly you throw alcohol in there.
Oh, yes.
You throw alcohol in there and the role that alcohol plays with respect to consent. And Kirsten, you'll get one party that wakes up on one side of the town and they're thinking, woohoo, got lucky last night. Okay, and you've got somebody waking up on the other side of town and they're thinking, far out, I was so drunk last night I couldn't give consent.
Yeah.
Now, this person over here genuinely believes that they had consent. Okay, this person over here genuinely believes I was so drunk I couldn't. I almost swore then, Kirsten, so I just...
Oh, go for it.
That. But they're sitting over this side of the town thinking, geez, I was so drunk I couldn't give consent. So what happens in that situation? Well, if someone wants to, they'll go and make a complaint to the police and then they'll leave it up to an independent jury of 12 people to be making that decision. So in Australia, like most countries, what's happened is there has been this huge pressure on police to be prosecuting claims. And what I mean by that is that in years gone by, police had a certain level of discretion about whether they would charge or not. But invariably what police are deciding to do now is if somebody makes a complaint, well, and particularly in a situation where it's he said, or she said, or she or he said, that they will then leave it up to an independent jury of 12 people to make that decision.
I imagine the courts are getting busier and busier.
Well, the courts will. But so let's not, Kirsten, you're probably aware that in Australia, I think we're looking at, with respect to data, we're looking at the rate of success in all sexual assault cases is less than 2%.
You're kidding.
Yeah, less than 2%.
So do you mean it goes to court and only less than 2%
will
are
be
found
successful?
Guilty?
Yes.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, well, that's what the data reflects. So one of the reasons why they have introduced the new laws with respect to affirmative consent is because they say, well, it's not, the current laws aren't giving enough people justice.
Wow.
Now, people will feel, I know that some people will feel uncomfortable with those changes, but that's, they're making their way through Parliament and most people are quite comfortable with those orders being made. Now, I created the resource that we, and the work that we do within schools or for instance, with the sporting organisations that we work with. I don't think it's a big issue from a point of view that the audiences that I work with, they can certainly appreciate that you need to be checking in, that when it comes to intimacy, that it's an ongoing, consent is freely given, it can be freely withdrawn, it can be given at any time, it can be withdrawn at any time.
Yeah.
So I think that this generation has certainly come a long way from even when I started in 2007. They're far more educated, they're far more empathetic. which is nice, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, I don't know how to put this. Do you think there is a socioeconomic component? Sorry, that's a very politically incorrect thing to say. But
No, it's not a. Like, what are we talking about? We if you want to talk about are there issues with respect to violence within lower socioeconomic communities? Of course there are. But are there issues with respect to gender violence in all levels of society? Yes, there are. And I got quite upset. It was a week ago, and I went and posted on did a post on Instagram or something like that. But on the front page of the newspaper, there's a coronial inquest in relation to another woman that had been murdered. Kelly Wilkinson got resolved. That was the front page of the newspaper. You go back 3 pages within the newspaper, there's a person that, and again, these people aren't from lower socioeconomic communities, but you go 3 pages into the newspaper and there's another person within the state has got 20 pages of domestic violence and he's going 18 months inside.
That's horrendous.
Well, why is it taking 20 pages for that person to then be, getting placed in detention? And then you go to another state and then there's a person that's being sentenced to 8 years for repeatedly raping his wife over a period of 6 to 7 years, and he was a former White Ribbon ambassador. That's just one day's newspaper, and so we look at this and we say, geez, when's it going to stop? And Kirsten, that's when, one of my big issues is that to men, we've got to be standing up. For so long that men have just been saying, well, this isn't our problem, it's women. It's women that are being, based purely on data. Okay, so women are going to experience more violence at the hands of their partner than men.
Yes.
Okay, that's just based purely on data. Women, what is it? We're looking at around about, what is in Australia, we're looking at 1 in 3 women aged over the age of 15 is going to experience at least one episode of domestic violence. In relation to sexual violence, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, depending upon which data you're looking at. With respect to sexual harassment, we're looking at 52% of women 15 years and over will experience at least one episode of sexual harassment. Those figures are off the chart.
Absolutely.
Now, it's happening with men as well, but nowhere near the same level with respect to women. But are we going to change it? The best way that we've got of changing this is by men starting to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to play a part to bring about change, and starting to call out behaviours. So a lot of men are shutting down on this stuff because they get so sick and tired of hearing about how it's all about toxic masculinity and all males are bad, etc. Now, that's rubbish. Not all males are bad. The majority of men...
it must be horrible as a man to feel like you're having this sort of judgment towards you.
I don't. No, Kirsten, don't justify it, from a point of view that men, I don't think that men feel that way. I think that that's an excuse that men put out there and say, oh, it's not, but overwhelmingly, the majority of men are good men,
yes,
but the overwhelming majority of men are still sitting down and letting behaviours occur without calling it out. So,
I hear
you. If you've got, and can I swear?
Yes.
I can swear. Okay. So if you've got a mate and he's calling his partner or he's calling his wife a fucking bitch, okay, well, you should be calling that out. And you should be saying, mate, come on, here's the one you love. Well, this is, you loved her at some stage. It's not healthy. If you see, derogatory comments or that they're talking about, start calling that behaviour out. Or if you start to read the warning signs where you think that this bloke could be, committing acts of domestic violence, well, that's the time that you should be reaching out to your mate and saying, hey, listen, I think you need to be getting help. Okay, I'm here with you. All right, let's go and get some help. because you don't want to be that man that sits back and then his partner or his wife or his girlfriend then ends up in hospital, and you don't ever want to be that bloke that says, geez, I could have read the warning signs there, I could have done more. But it's only when that men, if we can get men to be engaging more and to be calling it out. That's what's required.
Yeah, and to step up and to step in. But there's a bit of a crowd effect though, isn't there? Often something can be happening and people can sort of say, oh, and they can step away and feel like that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's stepping into that space and saying,
it is. It's about being... it's about being courageous, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, and that's one of the virtues that men would like to think that we have, is we're going to be able to have the courage to stand up, to say, hey mate, tone it down. Geez mate, you don't need to use that language. All right, you know. But it's only when we start, that becomes a norm and that becomes acceptable, do I believe that we're going to start seeing a change. Because at the moment we've got... so
we're talking about a cultural change.
Yeah, we are talking about a cultural change. At the moment, this change is being driven by women, and they must get so frustrated because, you know, I sit on a number of committees, I suppose, but the one thing that everybody talks about is how do we engage men, and I know that men are switching off, you know, because they feel as if they are under siege. They feel as if, geez. You know, it's always, you know...
I think that word courageous is brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it conjures up what they want to be.
Yeah.
And it holds them accountable if they're not being.
So, Kirsten, I spoke to you about this before we started. One of the most incredible men that's... he's died now. His name was Eddie Jaku. And he wrote The Happiest Man on Earth, and I'm not sure if people will know it, they're incredibly famous, but he was, his family died in the death camps of Auschwitz. He survived, and you would have thought that a man like that would be filled with revenge and thoughts of violence and rage. No, not Eddie, you know. And what he said was that he was driven to make it a better place. And he spoke about humans. We need to teach humans how to behave like humans. And so I use that, but I bring it back to, you know, what does it mean? Well, it means being respectful, being reputable, and being responsible. You follow through on those 3 R's, we can't go wrong. They're my 3 R's, by the way, they're not Eddie's, but Eddie is just this incredible... he's passed. As I say, he died, 5-6 years ago, but...
he did well.
More years. I don't know, it would have been some years back, but just a very inspirational character. But I think that's what we need to be hearing. I think we need to be...
And what you're describing there is, from a psych perspective, strength of character.
Yep.
And that's very much learnt to a large degree from parents, from role modelling, you know, for them to have those values and to hold themselves to those values. You know, so it's intergenerational, isn't it? And... you know, so not only as men in society looking for any moments that they can step in and, as you say, be courageous, but also with their children to instill those values, and so the next generation comes through.
Well, breaking the cycle, I suppose, and then, but it does come back to finding those role models then, doesn't it? So if they're not getting it through their family, who is going to be the person that's going to provide them with that strength of character? So I suppose we rely upon schools to be, you know, showing them good characters. Sport is a big thing, you know, role models there. But I do think that, I'll come back to that from a point of view, there is this big focus about toxic masculinity, and I hate those words, you know, toxic masculinity.
How would you define that?
Oh, it's just so negative, isn't it? You know, toxic.
It's saying that masculinity is bad, and it's not.
It's poisonous. You know,
it's not.
Poisonous.
Masculinity is wonderful within men and women.
Yeah, yes.
No, it's not masculinity. It's just people who are being power-orientated and not being mindful of the other person and not minding inflicting harm and putting their selfish needs over others.
That comes back to to power, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And the abuse of power.
Well, the majority of rape isn't even about sexual gratification. It's about power.
Of course.
So, yeah.
And same thing with domestic violence and gender violence.
100%.
Yeah.
When you say gender violence, can you define that for listeners?
Oh, no, I just... sometimes when we talk about domestic violence, people think that is going to be in relation to a family environment or a relationship environment. But gender violence is based on a person's sex, isn't it? So, violence towards women or violence towards men. And predominantly we're talking about violence towards women.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, there wasn't talk about consent. Not really.
No.
Not really. It was just kind of unspoken, and I guess if you had common sense, you used it. And do you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. But, Kirsten, you and I both know, because I have this conversation with my 87-year-old father, a very conservative father, and Dad says to me, there was never domestic violence in my day, son.
Oh.
There was never any sexual violence in my day. What a load of rubbish. It was happening all the time.
Oh my gosh.
But no one was ever talking about it.
And people didn't have freedom to leave because they didn't have Centrelink or support.
Yeah, so it was happening. Do I think it was as rife as it is today? Of course it was.
Yeah.
The only thing that has changed is we're talking about it.
It was normalised back then.
And I always remember, I come back to that, there was I think that there was she was a general or a two-star general, something along those lines, over in the Marine Corps, and she had been tasked with reducing the rates of sexual assault that was occurring within the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And after she'd been appointed, I think it was for the first couple of years, they then came back and they looked at the data, and it had gone through the roof. And you appreciate everybody saying to her, listen, you look at this, you failed, And she said, no. The big thing is that people now feel comfortable coming forward and reporting. So you are going to expect that there is going to be a spike.
More disclosure.
You would think that the rates are going to go up before they get better.
Yeah. It's very powerful.
Yeah. I just may have butchered that analogy, okay? But
no, you did great.
But
you did great.
I can find the story and the incredible woman that brought about that change.
No, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I have noticed a parallel clinically with families that are more open in talking about issues. Talking about relationships, talking about, who's being aware of, who's in their world and how they're feeling about, what's happening. And if the kids are nervous, they can come and talk with their parents. Parents that talk about values. I see that there's a dramatic reduction in those children or teenagers making these sorts of poor choices. And I'm seeing that with families that they don't verbalise this stuff, that there's a dramatic increase in poor choices for the kids, impulsive choices, and that's to do with the phone, photos, as well as consent with sex. So lack of consent. That's what I'm seeing.
Because I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that the best thing we can ever do as parents is make sure that those lines of communication are always there open.
100%.
And to ensure that do whatever we can to make sure that your children know that the person that has got their back always is going to be their parents. They're going to be there, So I had the most beautiful story that happened recently. A father contacted me after a session I'd done, and he said, I wanted to share with you this story. So what had happened was that his son had been in his bedroom and had been engaging in...
relations?
Yeah, relations. But this incredible woman had been on, the young woman had been, sharing images, and he thought, wow, this is the real deal. And she said, hey, can you share? And with that, he shares.
Right.
Okay, and with that, the text comes back and says, gotcha. $500 is going to happen. I was going to put it out there. And the son came out to his father and said, "Dad, I've fucked up. I stuffed up. It's, this is what's happened." And the response from his father was, "Son, I've got you. Okay, I've got you." And with that, he contacted eSafety, had the imagery taken down. It was just all swung into action. Now, if that son hadn't have had that trust in his dad, despite the shame and imagine what that young kid was going through. He would have been mortified, that this could have been out there. And to be able to then go to his father and the father says, "Hey, I got your son," and then, swings into action. That to me I love that story.
That's what it's about.
It is what it's about. Now a lot of parents are going to struggle with that communication. I don't know why. I just, from my point of view, the best thing, the greatest thing I've ever done in my life is as being a parent. Sam and I, that is our greatest achievement with our 4 children, and I would like to think that we're always going to be the home base for them.
No question there.
Yeah.
I think that the capacity to parent and to be accessible and to role model is a reflection of that adult's own mental health and their own self-awareness and their own ability to verbalise. And if you don't adult very well, I don't think you can parent very well. And so we're kind of coming back to fundamental mental health issues, really, broader issues.
Kirsten, I am by no means the perfect parent, I can tell you, and my adulting is probably fails in a lot of ways, but I'd like to think that when the chips are down, that is the most important time for us.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
And that's where you hope, and I know that all your listeners, that that will resonate with them, because that's the number one thing that we want. But it's being that, letting your children know that, it doesn't matter how much trouble you're going to be in. The love for you is always going to be there, and I've got your back on this.
So can I ask, as we wrap up, to give a snapshot of what consent rules are? Is that possible? Can I say my understanding and you tell me how I'm wrong?
Yeah, for sure.
Is that okay? And jump in?
Yeah.
So teenagers and kids out there, don't share any images of your private parts on your phone or on the web, because if you're under the age of 16, then...
Yeah. So let's break the law down with respect to mobile phones, and I'll dumb it down so that everybody can understand.
Thank you.
And so this is the law in Australia, but it's similar over in the UK as well. And basically what it says is that it is a sexual offence without a person's consent. So consent is a big thing. To take a picture or to film a person when they're doing a private act, or alternatively, they're in a spot where they could reasonably expect privacy. So consent, private act, or reasonably expect privacy.
So that means if someone posts an image of themselves, that's not illegal, but if you share it, it is illegal. Yeah,
so if someone says, a couple which are over the age of 18, I don't want to get into, I just want people to presume that if you're under the age of 18, you shouldn't be doing it. Okay, so let's not, let's go into...
There you go.
But certainly with 2 consenting adults, they can be sharing imagery. There's no problem there, between 2 consenting adults. And that's consent to share the imagery. The consent to share it with you.
With each other.
But not to distribute it to anybody else.
Absolutely.
And even to show someone would be distributing it,
Yeah. But under the age of 18, we're
let's
in
say,
very dodgy waters.
Right. So let's just,
post.
I don't want to even talk about with under 18s, because we can do that on a separate one, and we talk about the in different jurisdictions as well.
And with regard to consensual sex, that there needs to be checking in with each other
as
it progresses.
You check in
to ensure
every step of the way, okay? And you're looking for verbal cues and non-verbal cues as well, affirmative consent.
And alcohol?
Alcohol. So when we talk about alcohol, I always have this, when I'm giving my sessions, I'll talk about that people know that when they're cold stone sober, they can consent to whatever they want. Yes?
Yep.
And then you get a few drinks on board.
Yep.
Okay, and what happens at that point, you can still consent, but you're starting to lose your inhibition, so your decision-making is becoming a bit blurry. Okay,
Yes.
You can still consent, okay? But then what happens, you get into the grey area because you have a few more drinks and now you're in a situation where you're not only losing your inhibitions, but you're starting to lose your ability to give consent. That grey area is a danger zone, okay?
Yes.
And then what happens, you have a few more drinks and then you get to a stage where you start the indicia that you've lost the ability to consent is you're slurring words, you're vomiting, you're, unsteady on your feet, those sorts of things, so that you've now passed over to a stage where even if you want to consent, you can't consent. And then obviously if someone's passed out, they can't consent to anything.
So it's degrees of alcohol in the system.
Yeah, it is. It is, and that's what we. And a lot of people say, well, what happens if you're both drunk? Okay, what happens if you're both drunk? Well, who's committing the deed then? Well, first of all, being drunk is no defence to an offence, so you can't go and rob a bank and say I was pissed, that's why I did it. Likewise, you can't rape someone and say I was drunk, that's why it happened.
Good point.
But then if you have a look at particularly with the act of rape, obviously rape is the act of penetration, and if a male can get it up, well, he mustn't have been that drunk to be able to commit the deed.
A very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
So
I think you've had so many conversations on this topic.
Oh yeah, no, I get them all, but it's not legal advice I'm giving. Okay, we're talking generally, all right. So I always say that people have to go and get their own legal advice, etc. But it's trying to put it into terms that people will readily understand.
I absolutely love that you've come along because I'm all about increasing the conversation.
Yep.
And I hope that this then goes and creates other conversations.
Yeah, I hope so. So
and
it's all designed, Kirsten. It's everything that I do is all designed to start a conversation. If we can get people talking about this, if I can get young adults going home, kids, 16, 17, 18, going home and talking to their parents about sexual harassment, about consent, about, if I can get people having that conversation, well, I've won. If I can start one conversation, that'll be the ripple effect.
Then that's a good outcome.
Yep.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you so
Thanks,
much
Kirsten.
for coming along.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Yep.
So if anyone wants to catch me online, we've got the website, kirstenhunterauthor.com, lots of free resources there, Facebook and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author, and TikTok, would you believe, Dr. Kirsten Hunter. So thank you again, Adair.
No problem, Kirsten.
Really
Lovely
appreciate
being
it.
here.
No worries.
Okay, thank you.